The rain strikes the stone like 1,000 whispered accusations. I stand before what remains. Walls that no longer shelter, towers that no longer watch, gates that no longer close. The wind tears through the empty windows, carrying with it something older than sound, older than silence. This castle does not welcome, it endures, and in that endurance there is a question I cannot yet name. What happened here, in this forgotten corner of Wales, in the year of our Lord 1245? The storm answers only with thunder. The stones answer only with stillness. And I, a traveler with no claim to this land, no right to its secrets, I answer with my presence, my breath against the cold, my footsteps on ground that has drunk both rain and blood. If you enjoy exploring forgotten places and lost centuries, make sure to subscribe. Our journey is just beginning. The road to this place is not a road at all, but a memory of one. I began my journey 3 days ago, in a valley where the language shifts with the slope of the hills. English on one side, Welsh on the other, and in between, a silence that belongs to neither. The land here does not invite settlement. It tolerates it. Green hills rise and fall like the breathing of something vast and sleeping, their flanks scarred with stone walls older than any charter, older than any lord's claim. Sheep move across them like white thoughts drifting through a dark mind. The castle appeared first as a rumor. A shepherd mentioned it, his words half swallowed by the wind, his hand gesturing vaguely toward the western crags. Then as a shadow, a geometry too deliberate to be natural, perched on a ridge where the earth falls away into mist. And finally, as I climbed the last steep path, as certainty. The air smells of rain that has not yet fallen, and earth that has never dried. There is peat in it, and wild thyme crushed underfoot, and something else, something like iron left too long in water. The sky is the color of a bruise, purple-gray and swollen, pressing down on the land as if trying to smother it back into the sea from which, in some ancient age, it rose. I hear no voices, no bells, no cattle lowing in distant fields, only the wind, which here does not blow but pours, a river of air rushing down from the high places, bending the gorse and heather, making the grasses hiss like whispers in a conspiracy. It is the kind of wind that makes you lean into it, that makes walking feel like an argument you are slowly losing. The castle stands perhaps 200 feet above the valley floor, its back pressed against a cliff face, its front commanding a view of miles, of forests that have reclaimed fields, of streams that glint like veins of silver through the green, of other hills that rise in the distance, each one a question without an answer. This was a place built not for comfort, but for sight, for warning, for the grim mathematics of defense. As I draw closer, details emerge from the general ruin. The outer wall is breached in 3 places, great gaps where stone has tumbled down the hillside, now half buried in moss and bramble. The gatehouse still stands, though its wooden gate is long gone, leaving only the stone arch, pointed and solemn, like a mouth frozen mid-sentence. Above it I can just make out a worn carving, something heraldic perhaps, though weather and time have rendered it anonymous, a ghost of authority. I pass through. The sensation is immediate and unsettling, a crossing of threshold, a movement from one quality of air to another. Inside, the wind changes its voice, becomes fragmented, confused, bouncing off broken walls and through collapsed roofs. The courtyard is choked with grass, thigh-high and wet, and scattered throughout it are stones that once were architecture. Lintels, corbels, pieces of vaulting rib, each one a word in a sentence no one can now read. I feel, as I always do in such places, impossibly small and impossibly brief. These stones were set by hands that have been dust for 6 centuries. They were shaped by men who believed, truly believed, that what they built would last, that their names would be remembered, that power, once claimed, could be held forever. And yet here I stand, and I do not know their names. I do not know if they died in their beds or on the points of spears. I do not know if they were loved. The rain begins, not gently but all at once, as if the sky has simply opened. Within moments, I am soaked. The stones darken. The world narrows to gray. And I think, This is how it always was here. This is the true weather of Wales. Not sun and shadow, but storm and stone, endlessly conversing, endlessly at war. I move through the courtyard slowly, letting my eyes adjust to the rain, to the ruin, to the peculiar grammar of collapse. There is a language to how things fall. A wall that has been pushed by siege engine or by time falls outward, its stones scattered in a radius that tells the story of force and direction. A wall that has simply surrendered to its own weight falls inward, compressing into itself, becoming a cairn of its own failure. Here, I see both, violence and entropy, fire and forgetting. The western wall is blackened, not by age but by flame. Great sooty streaks climb the stone like the shadows of something that tried to escape and couldn't. The mortar between the blocks has cracked and flaked away, leaving gaps through which wind and rain now pass freely. I place my hand against the char. It is cold, of course. Whatever burned here burned centuries ago. But there is something in the texture, the rough carbon residue, that makes my skin prickle. Fire leaves a memory in stone, and stone, in turn, remembers. Near the base of this wall, half buried in the grass, I find a sword. It is not whole. The blade has snapped perhaps a foot from the hilt, the metal corroded into a lace of rust, fragile as leaves in autumn. But the crossguard remains, and the grip, or what is left of it, a core of rotted wood wrapped in the ghost of leather. I do not pull it from the earth. It belongs there now, more root than weapon, more relic than tool. But I crouch beside it, and I think about the hand that last held it. Was it raised in triumph? In desperation? Did it fall from nerveless fingers, or was it buried deliberately, a marker, a memorial? The rain drums on my back, water runs in rivulets through the grass, pooling in the depressions where foundations once were, where cellars have collapsed into themselves. I stand and move on, deeper into the complex. To my left, the remains of what must have been a great hall. Its roof is entirely gone, but the walls still rise 20 feet, and in them, I can see the scars where beams once rested, where a second story was supported, where windows, narrow, defensive, looked out onto the approach. The floor is littered with debris, shattered slate that once was roofing, chunks of plaster that still bear traces of whitewash, fragments of pottery, a handle here, a rim there, pieces of vessels that once held wine or water or soup, that once were gripped by hands now 700 years silent. I pick up a shard. It is coarse, unglazed, the color of dried blood. There is a thumbprint pressed into the clay near the base, left by whoever shaped it on a wheel in some dim workshop, in some lost season. I hold it for a moment, feeling the weight of that inadvertent signature, then set it down again. To take it would be theft, not from any living claimant, but from the place itself, from the integrity of its slow dissolution. The wind shifts. For a moment, the rain eases, and in that brief respite, I hear something, a creaking rhythmic and low. My heart quickens. I turn, scanning the courtyard, the walls, the sky. There, high up on what remains of the eastern tower, a piece of wood, part of a shutter perhaps, or a door, hanging by a single iron hinge, swinging in the wind, back and forth, back and forth. A pendulum marking time in a place where time has lost all meaning. I breathe out. Of course, there is no one here. There has been no one here for longer than memory. And yet, as I stand in the center of the courtyard, rain returning now in sheets, I cannot shake the sensation of being observed, not by eyes, but by the place itself, by the stones that have stood through storm and siege, through fire and frost, through the slow erosion of wind and the slower erosion of forgetting. They have seen so much. They have outlasted so many. And I am just another figure passing through their long, patient vigil, here for a heartbeat, gone before they even notice. I pull my cloak tighter and move toward the chapel. I can see it now, set against the northern wall, smaller than the hall, more intact. Its door is a black rectangle, an opening into deeper shadow. And from within, I swear I can hear something. Not the wind, not the rain. Something older. I close my eyes and let the rain wash over me, and I try to imagine it. 1245. Edward is not yet king. That crown still rests on the head of his father Henry, far away in London, far away in a world of politics and papal letters and court intrigue. Here, on the edges of Wales, such things are rumors at best. Here, what matters is the harvest, the weather, the Lord's temper, the sharpness of the blade. The castle would not have been a ruin then. It would have been a machine, humming with purpose. I picture the courtyard as it must have been, not choked with grass but paved with stone, swept clean, busy. Servants moving between the hall and the kitchens, carrying firewood, carrying water drawn from the well whose stone rim I can still see, cracked and listing near the center of the yard. Chickens pecking at the gaps between stones. A dog, some lean, rough-coated hound, sleeping in a patch of sun that has broken through the clouds, one ear cocked for the sound of its master's whistle. The great hall would have been the heart of it all. Inside, the fire always burning even in summer, for warmth, for light, for the declaration of presence. Smoke rising through a hole in the roof or through windows left deliberately open, curling up into the rafters where hams and sausages hung, curing in the heat and fume. Long tables arranged in a U-shape, the Lord's table at the head, elevated, draped with cloth dyed expensive red or blue, the kind of color that announced wealth and connection. Below, on benches worn smooth by generations of backsides, the household. Knights, men-at-arms, stewards, clerks, huntsmen, falconers, each with their place, their rank, their small jealousies and alliances. Meals would have been communal and loud. Bread torn, not sliced, meat eaten with fingers and knives, the forks of later centuries not yet common here. Ale poured from jugs, slopping onto the table, soaking into the wood until the boards themselves smelled of fermentation. Dogs underneath, waiting for bones. Cats in the corners, waiting for mice. And above it all, the smell. Sweat and smoke and roasting meat and the sharp tang of tallow candles. And underneath, always, the faint sweetness of rot, because no matter how often the rushes on the floor were changed, something was always decaying somewhere. Outside, beyond the walls, the village. I have seen its traces on my approach. Foundations in the fields, ridges and furrows that speak of strip farming, a pattern imposed on the land, and then abandoned. Once there would have been perhaps 30 or 40 cottages clustered around the base of the hill, each one a single room with a hearth in the center, smoke drifting up through a hole in the thatch, walls of wattle and daub that had to be replastered every autumn, roofs that leaked, floors of packed earth that turned to mud when the rains came. The people who lived there would have worked the Lord's fields 3 days a week, their own the rest. They would have paid their rent in labor and in kind, so many bushels of barley, so many eggs, so many days hauling stone or mucking stables. Their lives would have been circumscribed by the seasons and the bells. The bell for matins, for vespers, for mass on Sunday when the priest, some younger son of a minor family, sent here because he had no inheritance and no prospects, would intone Latin they did not understand, promising salvation in a heaven they tried to imagine, but mostly just hoped would be warmer and less hungry than this. There would have been a market, perhaps twice a month, on the flat ground below the gatehouse, peddlers coming up from the coast with salt and fish, with iron nails and needles, with ribbons for the girls and leather for the boys, a weaver with bolts of rough wool, a potter with his wheel and his kiln-scarred hands, a blacksmith, his portable forge set up under an awning, hammering out repairs, shoeing horses, making the 1,000 small metal things that kept the world from falling apart. Hinges, buckles, the rings that bound barrels, the tips for plows, and there would have been festivals. Not many, but enough. The blessing of the fields in spring, everyone processing behind the priest with his censer and his holy water, sprinkling the furrows, praying to a God they hoped was listening, and to older gods they pretended they no longer believed in. Midsummer fires on the hilltops, couples leaping through the flames for luck, for fertility, for the simple joy of defying the dark. Harvest home, when the last sheaf was brought in and the Lord, If he was generous, if the year had been good, would open his hall and his barrels, and for one night the divisions would soften, and there would be meat for everyone, and dancing and songs in Welsh and English and the older tongue that had no name. Children would have run through the courtyard where I now stand, playing games with sticks and stones, hiding in the shadows, daring each other to touch the walls of the chapel after dark. Women would have drawn water from the well, gossiping in low voices, their hands red from cold and work. Men would have practiced with spears and bows in the list beyond the walls, knowing that someday, maybe this year, maybe next, the call would come, and they would have to march, to fight for a lord who might not even know their names, in a cause they did not choose, for land they would never own. It was a hard life, a short life by our measures. 35 years was old age, 40 was a miracle. Disease and injury, hunger and cold, childbirth and war. These were the four horsemen that rode through every generation, thinning it, culling it, testing its endurance. And yet, there was beauty too. I have to believe that. In the way the light fell through the trees in summer, in the taste of fresh bread after a week of stale, in the first cry of a baby who lived past its first night, in the singing, always the singing, at work and at worship, on the road and in the fields, because song was free, and it made the hours pass, and it reminded you that you were not alone. The rain eases again. I open my eyes. The courtyard is empty. The market is gone. The children are gone. The fires are cold. The songs are silent. But I heard them for a moment. I swear I did. The chapel draws me like a whisper draws the ear. It is smaller than I expected, no more than 40 feet long and half as wide, but its walls are thicker than those of the hall, its doorway lower, designed to make you bow as you enter. Whether in reverence or submission, I cannot say. Perhaps both. Perhaps they are the same. I step inside. The roof is partially intact here, a stone vault, ribbed and groined, though sections have collapsed, letting in shafts of gray light and rain. The floor is flagstone, uneven now, tilted by roots and frost heave slick with moss. At the far end, where the altar would have stood, there is only absence. A rectangular depression in the floor, stones pried up, perhaps for reuse elsewhere, perhaps by treasure hunters hoping for relics, for the silver candlesticks or the gilded chalice that almost certainly never existed here. This was not a rich foundation. This was a chapel of convenience, of necessity, of the minimum required to keep God from turning his face entirely away. But there is something here. I feel it immediately. The walls are covered in markings, not everywhere, not evenly, but in patches, especially near the east wall. There are inscriptions carved into the stone. Some are deep, deliberate, cut with care. Others are shallow, hasty, scratched with the tip of a dagger or a nail. I move closer, running my fingers over them, feeling the shapes before I can read them. Latin, some of it. Prayers. Miserere nobis, have mercy on us. Requiescat in pace. Rest in peace. Names, or what might be names, though the letters are worn, uncertain. Rees. Gulatis. Morgan ap Dafydd. Welsh names, carved by hands that knew the language of this land, the tongue that predates the Normans, the English, the castles themselves. And then, lower, near the base of the wall where someone would have had to kneel to carve it, something else. A symbol. Not a cross, though there are crosses elsewhere. This is older. A circle, and within it, a pattern of lines radiating from a center point, like a wheel, like the sun, like something half-remembered from a faith that has no church, no priests, only stones and groves and the turning of the year. I crouch beside it, my heart beating faster than it should. This is the thing they do not tell you in histories, the thing that does not survive in chronicles and charters. The faith of Wales in the 13th century was not one thing. It was a palimpsest, layer upon layer, Christian prayers spoken over pagan ground, Christ's cross planted in earth that had known other gods, older gods, gods with no names that could be written, only felt in the movement of wind through oak, in the speech of running water, in the silence of standing stones. This castle was built by Norman lords, or by Welsh lords who had learned Norman ways, who had married Norman wives, who had taken Norman titles. But the people who lived here, who worked here, who prayed here, they carried memories of druids, of Beltane fires, of sacrifices made not to saints but to the land itself, to the spirits that dwelt in hill and stream, that had to be appeased, honored, remembered. There is a story the shepherd told me before I climbed here. He told it reluctantly, as if unsure whether I would understand, whether I would mock. He said that this castle was cursed, not by any witch or demon, but by the land itself, because it was built on a sacred site, a place where the old ones had gathered, had lit fires, had sung songs to gods whose names were now forgotten. He said that the first lord who tried to build here went mad within a year, throwing himself from the tower. The second died of a wasting sickness, his flesh falling from his bones like meat from an overcooked carcass. The third endured, but his line did not. His sons died in battle, his daughters in childbirth, and within 3 generations the castle was abandoned, left to the wind and the rain and the slow reclamation of the earth. I do not know if this is true. I suspect it is not, at least not in the way the shepherd means. But I know that it is true in another way. Every ruin has its ghost story. Every abandoned place accrues legends like moss, like lichen, layers of narrative that obscure the harder, duller facts of economics and politics, and the simple, brutal mathematics of who has power and who does not. What I do know is this: there was a fire here. Not just the charring on the walls, though that is evidence enough. But in the chapel itself, I find traces. Burned timbers, carbonized almost to powder, scattered across the floor. Molten lead, once part of the roof, pooled in the corners and hardened into gray teardrops. And in the center of the nave, a circular patch of stone darker than the rest, as if something, or someone, burned there, hot and long, until the very rock changed color. I think of martyrs, of heretics, of the violence that always lurks at the edges of faith, the certainty that one's own God is the true God, and all others must be silenced, erased, consumed. Or perhaps it was an accident, a candle knocked over, thatch catching, flames racing up the walls, smoke filling the hall, people running, screaming, dying. Perhaps it was a raid. Welsh against Norman, Norman against Welsh, the endless back and forth of border warfare, burning what you cannot hold, salting what you cannot burn. I will never know. The stones do not tell me. The carvings do not tell me. But they tell me something. They tell me that people stood here in this small, cold room and they tried to speak to something larger than themselves. They tried to carve their prayers into permanence, to make their pleas last longer than breath, longer than memory. They failed, of course, we all do. But the attempt is everything. I stand in the center of the chapel, rain dripping through the broken roof, puddling at my feet, and I feel the weight of it, not of the stones, but of the hoping, all the hoping, down all the years, layered here like sediment, like strata, like the slow accumulation of dust that eventually becomes rock. And I wonder, what will archaeologists of the future make of our ruins? What will they carve from our walls? The keep rises at the southern edge of the complex, backed against the cliff, a final redoubt, a last refusal. It is the tallest structure still standing, perhaps 60 feet, though the battlements are gone, leaving the top jagged, toothless, like a jaw that has suffered too many blows. The walls are immensely thick, 10 feet at the base, tapering only slightly as they rise. This was not built for comfort. This was built for the grim algebra of survival. How long can we hold? How many can we fit inside? How much food? How much water? How many arrows before the end? The entrance is on the second floor, accessible only by a wooden stair that no longer exists. I circle the base, looking for another way in, and find it. A breach in the eastern wall, low and narrow, where stone has fallen or been pulled away. I have to crawl. The stone scrapes my back, my knees. Water runs through the gap, soaking me further, but I push through, and then I am inside. The interior is a single large chamber, perhaps 30 feet across, its floor flagged with stone, its ceiling lost in shadow. There is a fireplace built into the western wall, its chimney rising through the thickness of the stone, and I can see where smoke has blackened the walls above it, where countless fires warmed countless nights. A spiral staircase built into the northern wall climbs upward, its steps worn smooth in the center by the passage of feet, up and up into the levels above. I begin to climb. The stairs are treacherous, some have cracked, some are missing entirely, leaving gaps I have to leap across, trusting my weight to stone that has stood for 600 years and might, in this moment, choose to give way. The stairwell is dark. I trail my hand along the wall, feeling my way, feeling the cold, the damp, the texture of limestone pocked and pitted by time. I pass the third floor. A doorway opens into another chamber, smaller than the first, its window slits looking out over the valley. I can see for miles from here, even in the rain. Fields, forests, the silver thread of a river winding toward the sea. This was what they bought with their stone and their labor and their blood. Sight. The ability to see the enemy coming, to light the signal fires, to prepare. I climb higher. 4th floor. 5th. The staircase narrows, becomes steeper. My legs ache. My breath comes hard, and then, at last, I reach the top. The roof is gone, as I knew it would be. Only the walls remain, open to the sky, to the wind, to the rain that falls now in curtains, sweeping across the hilltop, across the valley, across the whole wide, indifferent world. I stand at the edge and look out, gripping the stone, feeling the wind try to push me back, to pull me forward, to claim me as it has claimed so much else. From here, I can see the whole castle laid out below me. The courtyard, the hall, the chapel, the outer walls with their breaches and their shadows. I can see the shape of it, the logic of it, the way it was designed to funnel attackers into killing zones, to provide overlapping fields of fire, to make every approach costly, every breach paid for in blood. But I can also see how small it is, how fragile, how against the vastness of the land, against the patience of the rain and the wind, against the sheer inexorable pressure of time, it was always doomed, not to a single siege, a single battle, a single fire, but to the slow grinding certainty that nothing built by human hands can last. That stone, no matter how well cut, how well laid, will eventually crack, shift, fall. That power, no matter how fiercely claimed, will eventually pass. That even names carved deep and proud will eventually wear away to nothing. I think of the lords who stood where I now stand, who looked out over their domain and felt the satisfaction of possession, the weight of responsibility, the cold fear of knowing that somewhere just beyond the horizon, someone else was looking back, plotting, planning, waiting for weakness. I think of their wives, their children, their retainers, all the small dramas and tragedies that played out within these walls, now forgotten, now lost, now less than dust. And I think of the strange democracy of ruin. Here, in this place, the Lord and the servant are equally absent. The conqueror and the conquered have both been conquered by time. The chapel and the dungeon, the hall and the stable, all are equally open to the sky, equally subject to decay. In the end, the castle makes no distinctions. It falls on everyone. There is a beauty in that, a terrible cold beauty. The rain intensifies. Lightning flickers on the horizon, followed, seconds later, by the deep rumble of thunder. The storm is moving closer. I should descend, I should find shelter, but for a moment longer I stay. I let the rain soak me. I let the wind howl. I let myself feel, just for a heartbeat, what it must have been like to stand here in 1245, to believe that this stone, this power, this name would endure. And then I let it go. I turn from the edge and begin, carefully, the long climb down. Night comes early to the valley, not because the sun sets, but because the storm swallows the light. By the time I descend from the keep, the courtyard is more shadow than substance. The walls black shapes against a black sky. The only illumination the brief, stuttering flashes of lightning that turn the world to silver and back to void. Thunder rolls across the hills like the voice of something ancient and angry, and the rain, which had seemed heavy before, becomes a deluge, a curtain of water so thick I can barely see 10 feet ahead. I need shelter. The hall is too open, too exposed. The chapel, with its collapsed roof, is scarcely better. But there, in the western range, I remember seeing a doorway half hidden by rubble, leading to what might have been a storage room or a guard chamber. I make my way toward it, stumbling over stones I cannot see, my boots squelching in mud, my cloak heavy and useless, plastered to my back by the relentless wet. I find the door, or rather, the absence of a door, just the stone frame, the threshold, the darkness beyond. I duck inside. It is not dry. Nowhere is dry, but it is less wet. The roof here is mostly intact, low-vaulted stone, and though water drips through cracks and runs in rivulets along the walls, the center of the room is merely damp rather than drenched. I sink down against the far wall, pulling my knees to my chest, shivering, listening to the storm rage outside. This is the hour when the mind begins to wander. Exhaustion, cold, the strange temporal dislocation of being in a place so thoroughly abandoned. These conspire to loosen the moorings of thought. I close my eyes, and when I open them, I am not entirely sure how much time has passed. Seconds? Minutes? The darkness is absolute except when lightning flares, and in those brief instants, the room leaps into existence. Stone walls, a low ceiling, a heap of something in the corner that might be rubble, or might be something else. I hear sounds. Not the storm. I have learned to filter that, to let it become background, a constant roar against which other things can be measured. No, these are different. A creaking, rhythmic and slow, like footsteps on old floorboards. Except there are no floorboards here, a scraping metal on stone like a blade being drawn. Except there is no one here. A voice, low and indistinct, speaking words I cannot quite make out, in a language I almost recognize. I tell myself, it is the wind. The wind funneling through gaps in the walls, through empty windows, through the throat of the keep, finding resonances, creating harmonics, the castle playing itself like an instrument. I tell myself this, and I almost believe it. But then I hear the singing. It is faint, almost inaudible beneath the thunder, but it is there. A melody, simple and mournful, rising and falling without words or with words so old, so worn, that they have become pure sound, pure sorrow. It comes from somewhere above, from one of the upper floors, or perhaps from the courtyard, or perhaps from nowhere at all, from the air itself, from the memory of air. I think of the chapel, of the carvings, of the people who knelt there, who sang there, who prayed there to gods old and new, who hoped that their voices would be heard, would be answered, would carry beyond the walls, beyond the years, into some eternity where suffering ended and peace began. I think of ghosts, not the white-sheeted phantoms of story, but the other kind, the ones made of repetition, of habit, of actions performed so many times in the same place that they wear a groove in reality, a track that can still be felt, still be heard, long after the actors themselves have gone. Or perhaps I am simply tired. Perhaps the cold has seeped too deep, and my mind, seeking warmth, seeking company, is conjuring presences where there are none. Perhaps the singing is only the wind, and the footsteps only my own pulse, and the voice only the murmur of my own thoughts, speaking to me in the third person, as if I were someone else, somewhere else, someone else. Lightning flashes. For an instant, the room is bright as day, and in that instant I see, or think I see, a figure standing in the doorway. Tall, cloaked, its face hidden in shadow. It does not move. It does not speak. It simply stands, watching, waiting. Thunder crashes. Darkness returns. I do not breathe. I do not move. I count my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 10. Another flash. The doorway is empty. I exhale, shaking. I tell myself it was a trick of the light, a play of shadow, my own cloak reflected somehow in the wet stone. I tell myself this, I do not believe it. I do not sleep that night. Though I drift in and out of something like sleep, a place where dreams and waking blur, where the rain becomes a drum and the wind becomes a choir, where I am both here, in this ruined castle in Wales, and elsewhere, in other times, other places, other ruins that I have known and will know, all of them connected by threads I cannot see but can feel, tugging at me, pulling me deeper into the labyrinth of history, of memory, of the vast, dark archive of the forgotten. And through it all the castle endures, silent, patient, waiting, for dawn, for decay, for the next traveler who will come and wonder and leave and be forgotten in turn. The storm breaks just before dawn. I do not see the sun rise, the clouds are too thick, the horizon too distant. But I feel the change, the slow shift from black to gray, from night to something that is not quite day, but is no longer night. The rain eases to a drizzle, then stops. The wind, which has howled for hours, drops to a whisper. And in the silence that follows, I hear birds. Just a few, tentative, testing the air, reclaiming the world. I rise stiffly, every joint protesting, and step out into the courtyard. The castle looks different in the gray light, smaller perhaps, or older. The stones are dark with rain, slick and shining, and the grass bends under the weight of water, each blade jeweled with droplets. Mist rises from the valley, thick and white, erasing the land, leaving only the castle, floating in nothingness, an island adrift in cloud. And there, near the gatehouse, I see him. An old man, standing with his back to me, looking out over the valley. He is dressed simply, rough wool trousers, a heavy coat patched and repatched, boots caked with mud. His hair is white, long, tied back with a strip of leather. He holds a staff gnarled and dark, and he leans on it as if it is the only thing keeping him upright. I approach slowly, my footsteps loud on the wet stone. He does not turn, does not acknowledge me. I stop a few feet away and wait. After a long moment, he speaks. His voice is soft, accented, the English tinged with the music of Welsh. You stayed the night. It is not a question. I did, I reply. He nods, still not turning. Few do. Most come in the afternoon when the light is good, when the weather is fair. They take their photographs, their sketches. They leave before the shadows grow long. You stayed. The storm, I say. I had no choice. Now he turns, and I see his face. It is deeply lined, weathered, the skin like old leather left too long in the sun. But his eyes are clear, sharp, the pale blue of winter sky. He studies me for a moment, and I have the uncomfortable feeling that he is seeing something I do not intend to show. There is always a choice, he says. You could have run, could have sought shelter in the valley, but you stayed. You wanted to. I do not deny it. He smiles, a small, sad expression that does not quite reach his eyes. My name is Gruffydd. My family has lived in the valley for longer than anyone remembers. My great-great-grandfather used to graze his sheep here before the walls became too dangerous, before the stones started falling. Now I come once a week, sometimes more, to check on the place, to make sure no one has vandalized it, to... He pauses, searching for words. To keep it company, I suppose. It's a lonely place, I say. It is. But it was not always. My grandfather told me stories his grandfather told him, about what this castle was before it fell. What happened, I ask. Why was it abandoned? Gruffydd leans on his staff, his gaze drifting back to the valley, to the mist. The English histories say it was burned in a Welsh uprising, sometime in the late 13th century, that it was retaken, held for a few years, then abandoned as too costly to maintain. That is the official story. The tidy story. And the other story? He is quiet for a long time. When he speaks again, his voice is softer, almost reluctant. The land here is old, older than the Normans, older than the Romans. There were people here before the Celts, before there were names for tribes, before there was even a concept of Wales as something separate from England. They left their marks, stone circles, burial mounds, places where the boundary between this world and the other was thin. He gestures with his staff, pointing to the chapel. They built the castle on one of those places, deliberately, some say, to claim it, to sanctify it, to drive out the old spirits with new prayers. But you cannot drive out what was here first. You can only anger it. I think of the carvings, the circle with the radiating lines, the blackened stone. My grandfather said that the lord who lived here in 1245, a man named Rhys ap Gruffydd, a Welshman who had sworn fealty to the English crown, he had dreams, terrible dreams, of fires that consumed without burning, of voices that spoke in languages no living man knew, of figures that walked the walls at night, figures made of shadow and smoke. He tried to ignore them, tried to drown them in wine, in prayer, in the distractions of war, but they grew worse. And then, one night, the chapel caught fire. No one knows how. There were no candles lit, no hearth in that room. But it burned, and in the burning, 7 people died, trapped inside. The door jammed, or locked, or held by something that had no body. He pauses. After that, Rhys left, took his family, his household, and rode east back toward the English border, toward lands that were safer, saner. The castle was left to a castellan, a minor knight, who stayed for a year, then 2. And then one morning, he was found dead in the courtyard. No marks on him, no signs of struggle, just dead. After that, no one would stay. The castle was declared cursed, haunted, and within a generation it was empty. Do you believe that? I ask. Gruffydd looks at me. Does it matter what I believe? The castle is empty. The people are dead. The stones remain. Belief does not change that. But the stories persist. Stories always persist. They are harder to kill than men. He shifts his weight, wincing. I will tell you this, though. I have been coming here for 40 years. I have spent nights here as you did, and I have never felt alone. Not truly. There is always something watching, waiting, not malicious exactly, but not welcoming either, just present. He taps his staff against the ground. The stones remember. That is what my grandfather said. The stones remember everything, every hand that laid them, every voice that echoed between them, every drop of blood that soaked into them. And in that remembering there is a kind of presence, a residue, not a ghost, not a spirit, but something, an imprint. I nod slowly. I have felt it too, in this castle, in others, the weight of all those lives, all that history, pressing down, soaking into the ground, into the walls, into the air itself. Gruffydd looks up at the keep, at the jagged top silhouetted against the lightening sky. You know what the saddest part is? In 100 years, maybe 2, this will all be gone. The walls will collapse, the stones will be taken, used for fences, for houses, for road fill. And no one will remember. Not the Lord, not the fire, not even the name of the place. It will become just another hill, another lump of green in a green land. But you remember, I say. I do. But I am old, and when I am gone, who will come here? Who will tell the stories? He shakes his head. Perhaps that is as it should be. Perhaps everything is meant to be forgotten eventually. Perhaps that is the only true peace. We stand together in silence, watching the mist burn away, watching the valley emerge, green and wet and impossibly old, and I think about all the castles I have visited, all the ruins I have walked through, all the places that were once filled with life and noise and purpose and are now only stone and silence. And I think about how, in the end, all we leave behind are stories. And stories, no matter how carefully told, always fade, always blur, always, eventually, disappear, unless someone keeps telling them. Gruffydd clears his throat. You should go. The path will be muddy after the rain. Difficult. You will want to reach the valley before dark. Thank you, I say, for the story. He waves a hand dismissively. It is not my story. It belongs to the stones. I am just borrowing it. As are you. He turns and begins to walk toward the gate, his staff clicking against the stone, his figure growing smaller, fading into the gray light. I watch him go until he disappears beyond the wall, and then I am alone again. But not entirely. The castle is still here. Still watching. Still waiting. And I am still listening. I leave at midday when the sun finally breaks through the clouds, turning the valley to gold. I walk slowly, stopping often to look back, to fix the image in my mind. The castle perched on its ridge, the walls catching the light, the keep standing proud despite the ruin, despite the centuries. From this distance, it almost looks whole, almost looks as it must have in 1245, when banners flew from its towers, when smoke rose from its hearths, when it was a living thing rather than a monument to death. The path is indeed muddy, treacherous in places, and I have to pick my way carefully, using my staff for balance, testing each step before committing my weight. The rain has swollen the streams, turning them brown and fast, and I have to detour twice to find crossings that will not sweep me away. As I descend, the valley opens around me. Fields appear, sheep scattered across them like stones, like clouds come to rest. A farmhouse, gray stone and slate roof, smoke rising from its chimney. A road, narrow and rutted, winding through the green. The ordinary world, the living world, the world that continues regardless of what crumbles and falls behind it. I think about what Gruffydd said, about forgetting, about how everything eventually is erased. And I wonder if he is right. If all this, the walking, the seeking, the documenting, is just a futile gesture against the inevitable. If ruins are meant to be ruined, and the past is meant to stay past, and we should simply let it go, let it fade, let it become soil and seed and something new. But I do not believe that. Or perhaps I do, but I choose to resist it anyway. Because to forget is not neutral. It is not passive. It is an act, a choice, a form of violence, however gentle. And to remember, to bear witness, to tell the story even if imperfectly, even if incompletely, that is also a choice, a refusal, a small, stubborn declaration that these lives, these stones, these moments mattered, that they were here, that they were real. I stop and turn one last time. The castle is small now, a gray smudge against the hillside, barely distinguishable from the rock itself. In another mile, it will disappear entirely, hidden by the curve of the land, by the trees, by distance and perspective. But I will know it is there, and that knowledge, fragile and uncertain as it is a form of continuity. A thread connecting me to Gruffydd, Gruffydd to his grandfather to the people who walked these walls, who lit these fires, who carved these stones. The thread will break someday. All threads do, but not today. I turn my face to the south, toward the road, toward the next village, the next ruin, the next forgotten place waiting to be found. My boots are caked with mud. My cloak is still damp. My shoulders ache from the weight of my pack, from the weight of the night, from the weight of all this remembering. But I am smiling. Because I was there. I stood in that courtyard. I climbed that keep. I heard the rain on the stones and the wind through the empty windows. I felt the presence of the past, not as an abstraction, not as a chapter in a book, but as a tangible thing, a texture, a temperature, a silence so deep it became a kind of sound. I was there, and now I am here, and the castle remains, doing what castles do, enduring, eroding, existing in the slow, patient way that stone exists, indifferent to our coming and going, our caring and forgetting, our stories and our silences. The path levels out. The valley floor is soft, the grass thick and lush, fed by the rain, by the rich soil, by the centuries of growth and decay and growth again. I follow a stream for a while, listening to its voice, to the way it speaks in ripples and eddies, in falls and pools, in a language that has no grammar, only music. Ahead I see a bridge, stone, 3 arches, old but maintained, its surface worn smooth by countless crossings. I pause at its center and look down into the water. It is clear now, the silt settled, the storm passed. I can see the bottom, the stones rounded and mossy, the small dark shapes of fish holding station in the current. And I think, this too is history. Not the grand history of kings and battles, but the small history of daily life, of crossing a stream, of mending a wall, of watching the seasons turn. This too deserves to be remembered. This too is sacred. I cross the bridge and continue south. The sun is warm on my shoulders now. The sky is clearing, the last of the clouds shredding and dissolving, revealing the deep, endless blue beyond. Birds sing in the hedgerows. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere, a church bell tolls the hour. And behind me, on its ridge, the castle stands, silent, watching, waiting for the next storm, the next traveler, the next chapter in its long, slow fall toward the earth from which it rose. I do not look back again. I carry it with me now, in my memory, in my words, in the mud on my boots and the rain smell in my cloak. I carry it as I carry all the other places I have walked through, all the other stones I have touched, all the other silences I have listened to. And when I am gone, when my own stones crumble and my own name is forgotten, perhaps someone else will come, will climb the ridge, will stand in the courtyard, will feel what I felt, know what I knew, carry what I carried. Perhaps, or perhaps not. It does not matter. The castle will still be there, doing what it has always done, standing, falling, becoming, and that in the end is enough. There is a question I am asked often by those who do not understand this compulsion. Why ruins? Why these cold, empty places, these monuments to failure and forgetting? Why not seek the living world, the warm world, the world of laughter and light? And I never have a good answer. Or rather, I have too many, and none of them quite capture the truth. But perhaps it is this. In ruins, time becomes visible. Everywhere else we are taught to ignore it, to pretend it does not exist, to live as if we are permanent, as if our works are permanent, as if the ground beneath us is solid and unchanging. We build our houses, our cities, our empires, and we tell ourselves they will last. We carve our names and our deeds, and we tell ourselves they will be remembered. But in a ruin, the lie is stripped away. Here, time is not a metaphor. It is a force as real as gravity, as relentless as water. It bends stone. It eats mortar. It pulls everything down, eventually into the same horizontal plane, the same level field. King and peasant, cathedral and hovel, all become, in time, the same dust, the same silence. And there is a strange comfort in that, a kind of terrible honesty, because if everything falls, then nothing we do is wasted. If everything fades, then every moment, no matter how small, how brief, has equal claim to eternity. The Lord in his hall and the child in the courtyard, the prayer carved deep and the prayer whispered once and forgotten, all are equally real, equally valid, equally doomed, equally saved. I think of the castle in Wales, of its stones settling into the earth, of the moss and the ivy slowly pulling it down, of the rain working its patient alchemy, transforming rock to soil, history to humus. I think of all the people who lived there, who loved there, who died there, whose names I will never know, whose faces I will never see, whose voices are lost to the wind. And I think, they were here. They mattered. Even if only to themselves, even if only for a moment. And that moment is not nothing. It is everything. We are all travelers through time, through this strange brief corridor between birth and death. We are all walking through ruins, whether we know it or not. Ruins of the past, ruins of the future, the ruins we ourselves will become. And the question is not whether we will be remembered. We will not truly, not forever. Even the greatest names fade. Even the greatest works crumble. The question is, what do we do with the time we have? Do we build, knowing it will fall? Do we carve, knowing it will wear away? Do we speak, knowing we will not be heard? Not in the end, not by anyone who could possibly understand. I think we do. I think we must. Because the alternative is silence. The alternative is to let the stones lie where they fall, to let the stories die untold, to let the darkness have the final word. And I refuse. We all refuse every time we light a candle, every time we sing a song, every time we tell a child about the world that was, so they might imagine the world that could be. The castle in Wales is falling. It has been falling for 700 years, and it will continue to fall for 700 more. But it is not gone. Not yet. Not while someone remembers. Not while someone climbs the ridge, stands in the courtyard, listens to the wind through the empty windows. Not while someone bears witness. And that is what I do, I suppose. I bear witness to the stones, to the silence, to the stubborn, irrational refusal of ruins to disappear completely, to the way they linger at the edges of our world, reminding us of depth, of duration, of all the lives and times that came before us and will come after. I am a traveler, a pilgrim perhaps, not to any shrine, any saint, any promise of salvation, but to the simple, sacred fact of existence, to the miracle that anything was here at all, that hands shaped these stones, that feet walked these paths, that voices rose in prayer and laughter and grief, and echoed through these halls and faded and are gone, but not entirely. Not while I remember, not while you remember, not while there is someone, anyone, to stand in the rain and the wind, to feel the cold stone beneath their fingers, to say, this was, this is, this will be in some form forever because it cannot not be, because it happened, because it was real. And reality, once it has occurred, cannot be erased. It can be forgotten. It can be misunderstood. But it cannot be undone. The stones were laid. The fires were lit. The prayers were spoken. And somewhere, in some dimension we cannot see, in some archive we cannot access, those moments persist, unchanging, eternal. I do not know if this is true. I suspect it is not. I suspect that when the last stone falls, when the last name is spoken for the last time, when the last memory flickers and goes dark, that will be the end. Total. Final. Absolute. But I choose to believe otherwise. I choose to believe that nothing is ever truly lost, that every moment leaves a mark, however faint, that the universe remembers, even if we do not. And so I walk. Through Wales, through time, through the endless procession of days and years and centuries. I walk and I look and I listen, and I write. These inadequate words, these fragile syllables, knowing they too will fade, will crumble, will become the ruins of some future traveler to discover and decipher and, perhaps, to mourn. But that is all right. That is as it should be. Because in the end we are all ruins in the making. We are all castles, standing proud for a moment, then falling, then returning to the earth. And the question is not how to avoid the fall. There is no avoiding it. The question is, how do we stand while we can? With grace, with courage, with a fierce, defiant joy. The castle in Wales taught me that. The storm, the stone, the silence, the stubborn, beautiful fact of its persistence, despite everything, despite time itself. And I am grateful for the journey, for the rain, for the ruins, for the reminder that we are all, always, standing on sacred ground, because all ground is sacred, All moments are holy. All stones, all stories, all silences. We need only stop and listen. And remember, if this journey moved you, don't forget to subscribe and join me on the next voyage through forgotten worlds.